Thanks. Welcome to the discussion meeting of the Mount Lebanon Commission. Mr. McGill.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight's agenda, we will welcome our new junior commissioner, Clara Sun. We will have a consideration of a resolution approving the issuance of a tax exempt note on behalf of St. Clair Health. This is actually a 2017 note that had a balloon payment that's due in October. We're going to extend that out, and we will have someone here from St. Clair Health tonight in case there are any questions related to that. We will have a consideration of a resolution authorizing the submission of a grant application for funds to make accessibility upgrades and potential facility expansions at the rec center. This is a $500,000 grant application. There is no required municipal match. And just to remind the commission, we have two other pending grant applications. One is for $2 million and a second for $250,000. So hopefully we're successful in obtaining one, not all of those. And finally, we'll have the consideration of the award of the contract to Councilman Hunsaker for work related to the filtration system replacement project at the swim center. And my understanding is that Recreation Director John Ellen reviewed that with the commission at the last discussion.
Councilman Hunsaker is not a person.
It's a part.
Are you bringing that up?
Okay. Rodney, you're up next.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight's one discussion session is concerning our new sort of meeting schedule called inspections consultations. We've been very busy in the inspections office, and with the multiple different types of permits that we receive and review and issue, we felt the need to basically broaden the aspect as far as making people or helping people understand the different rules and regulations dealing with not only building codes, but zoning ordinance and other municipal ordinances dealing with the permits that we process through the inspections office. So the idea came up as far as creating some pathway for these inspection consultations to have sit-down meetings and or phone calls, but to basically put forth a time and schedule that a resident or a contractor can basically sit down with any one of us in the inspections office to discuss future projects or proposed projects or any aspect of anything that we regulate in the inspections office. A large percentage of our review time goes with reviewing incomplete applications and then forwarding correspondence, back and forth between owners and contractors to get the proper information to determine compliance. So having this method to basically come forth, explain what you want to do, we can explain what you need to basically have as far as paperwork necessary to issue the permit. We can go over the rules and regulations as far as what you're proposing, whether or not it'll work or not. And then hopefully you can then submit a complete application and help speed up the actual review and application process time that it takes to review and process the permit to be issued, so that, basically the work can begin to be done. So we had our first one. We started out basically the first Wednesday of the month just to see how it would schedule out. Obviously, we can extend that, to do it, every other week, once a week, depending on, how much activity we actually get. We had our first one last Wednesday on the 4th. Unfortunately, we only had one resident sign up. It was a husband and wife from Gypsy Drive. And basically they came in and they had some questions about some fencing. And then while we were there, that led into additional questions concerning different uses. So it was very productive, and they were very appreciative of, the service that we basically provided as far as helping them understand what the rules and regulations were dealing with the fence and any proposed uses that they have for future use of their property. So to me, it was very productive as well. I don't want to limit this just to a meeting or a scheduled meeting with with us. I mean, if any resident or any contractor, anybody really has any questions or concerns, we're here 8:30 to 5 every day, Monday through Friday. We're open to phone calls, and, I'd rather educate basically people to understand, because the last thing I want to do is tell somebody that they have to do something and not explain why they have to do it, or why the code requires it. So hopefully this will, help speed up the application process by helping people understand what they need to submit. And we can take a look at, our handouts that we have. I know Laura has put this on the website under trending, and there's a link actually to all the handouts and the permit applications for different projects that we have handouts and applications for throughout it. So it takes you right to that page. You can scroll down and find the actual application and handout information for your proposed project. But again, I encourage anybody to just call in at any time if they want to discuss it. But this gives a nice format that they can come in. I can pull up a GIS map. I can actually pull out, a copy of the ordinance, a copy of the building code, and actually show them, what the regulations are. So.
Rodney, can you go over for I'll say the dedicated hours that you're setting aside, can you go over sort of when you're scheduling those meetings, the process for a resident that might be interested in scheduling a meeting and how that works?
Yeah, so right now we set it up from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. on that first Wednesday of the month. And you can call in. We blocked out half-hour sessions, half-hour meetings, just to basically, so that we didn't get, last thing we wanted to do is turn people away. So obviously, if we have more, we can schedule, at other times. But the idea was to start out first Wednesday of the month from 2 to 5, half-hour sessions. As long as you call in before the Friday, so it would be the last Friday of the month, I guess. As long as you call in before then to schedule it, those time slots will be available for that. So
Rodney, what's the phone number to call?
it's just the General Inspections Office, which is 412-343-3408.
That's for our vast television audience here.
Yeah, and that takes you right to Diane's office. She's our administrative assistant, and basically she can schedule it, within those time limits. And again, I've advised her that, if they want to just talk to me directly, right then when they call in, feel free to transfer them into me, and we'll be able to discuss it. A lot of times right now we do it, if somebody calls in, I'll ask if they're in front of a computer. So whenever I ask them that and they are in front of a computer, I show them how to pull up the GIS map. I tell them how to pull up the ordinances and the applications and the handouts. So that helps when you have visual aids in front of you to basically show somebody.
When does Muni City go live? Do we know?
Well, right now we're live internally. So we're still working out like the forms and the format of how everything works. And then we're going to go into the phase of what they call Connect, which is the public facing side. So we have to go through those phases to be able to make sure that everything communicates well with the actual live session of it. So we're going to be starting that very soon now, within the next couple of weeks. So hopefully after that, that'll go smooth and we can get rolling.
Yeah.
And I have
Great.
that slated for a
Yeah,
future
I saw.
commission discussion session so that you'll actually get I'll say a live demo of the system. But I do want to commend Rodney, his staff, and actually the commission for the continued efforts to improve the process, the communication. Municity 5 will help with that a lot, because sometimes we get caught in a situation now where there's not a complete exchange of information among all
Sure.
parties
Yeah.
involved. So this will add some transparency so that everybody will have access to the process, where it stands, any review notes or comments that have gone back and forth. Again, always trying to improve the process for the residents and for staff, quite honestly, because if we can do that, it will increase their time available to focus on getting through those applications a little quicker.
Yeah.
So again, I thank Rodney and his staff and the commission for your commitment to the process. So
And thanks to Rodney for this idea. This is a great idea, and I really appreciate the initiative you took.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Rodney? No, all right, that is active transportation plan, Mr. McMeans.
Yes, I also have folks joining me from Tool Design. So we have Katie online and
Mhm.
Kristen in the room with us. So I'll start and just give a sort of high level overview of the process we went through, and then I'll turn it over to the folks from Tool Design to talk about
Okay,
what they're going to do for us. So this project was conceived as a multi-municipal active transportation plan. Mount Lebanon Commission budgeted money in our 2024 operating budget, as well as Dormont Borough budgeted money in their operating budget for this year to do it as a multi-municipal collaborative plan. We put together a project team that was comprised of Commissioner Flynn, as well as myself as the staff lead on the project. Rudy Suko, our Public Works Director, Eric Milliron, our Commercial Districts Manager, also had some input from a staff standpoint, as well as Seth Davis from the Mobility Board, being the primary liaison to that board as the board chair. And he collected some feedback from Mobility Board members as well. And then we had some representation on the project team from Dormont staff, and Dormont, theirs is called the Safe Mobility Commission, which is their version of the Mobility Board, basically. So the group put together an RFP. We issued the RFP. We received responses. We interviewed 2 firms, and after the interviews, the project team was unanimous in our recommendation of Tool Design to be the firm to conduct the active transportation plan. So our recommendation is that we award a contract to them. You will notice that Mr. McGill did not mention that in his summary of tonight's meeting agenda, because as we've done with consultant contracts in the past, we present at one discussion session, then have the agenda item on the following meeting. So the idea would be to have the item on the second September meeting for contract approval. And we'll also have to go through that same process in Dormont to have them approve a contract. Ideally, it will be our standard contract that both parties can, or all 3 parties can sign, and we'll be kind of good to go from there. So with that, I will hand it over to Kristen in the room and Katie online to kind of run through their proposal of what they're going to provide to the 2 communities. So. Your presentation, you should be able to just use the arrow keys to.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll let Katie kick us off, if that's okay. You guys.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I'm not able to be there in person. Very happy that Kristen is able to be in the room. So I'll just walk through the beginning and then kick it over to Kristen and chime in throughout. You want to move ahead to the next slide. So the team of key staff that we've proposed for the project include myself as project manager, which I have a slide a bit later with some of my background and experience so you can get to know me. Kristen, who's in the room with you all this evening, and then John Burkle from Pashik, who has been working with you all on aspects of your comprehensive plan and some other key projects in and around the community. So we are bringing them on to support us with community engagement, which feels like a great fit. You can go to the next slide. So a little bit about Tool Design. If you've never heard of us or haven't worked with us in the past, we are a firm that focuses exclusively on active transportation. Biking, walking, transit, traffic calming, and safety are the main categories of our work. We have a range of services from planning to landscape architecture, urban design, and engineering. And we have, as a firm, completed over 350 active transportation and design documents in the United States and some in Canada. Obviously, Kristen and I haven't personally been responsible for all 350 of these products, but we are very proud to work for a firm that has built expertise in this area and kind of a deep bench of knowledge that we have access to and can learn from and grow as we work with you. We also have we noticed that in the proposal, the request for proposal that the community put forward, that there's an emphasis on safety and safety action plan components, which is something we've been working as a firm on in the Midwest for several years with the release of what's called SS4A funds, Safe Streets for All. It's a federal program that has been funding not just planning, but also implementation projects for communities that have an adopted plan. So on this slide, we just highlighted a couple of the key plans that we've worked on in the Midwest. Kristen is going to talk a bit more about our work relative to Pittsburgh. And then as a firm as well, on the next slide, Kristen, thank you, or Ian is controlling it. Thank you, Ian. We have been responsible for shaping some of the country's kind of seminal guidance related to active transportation, including the AASHTO guidance, which kind of is, required for engineers to follow as they design and develop bike facilities. Both the 2012 edition and the draft that is set to be released or adopted at some point in the next year or two, we hope. We also have developed resources for other states and communities as they pursue active transportation work. The cover on this slide, the image is from our active transportation plan guidance in Ohio that the state has now adopted and uses as they fund any local active transportation plan, which are dozens a year, which is a pretty amazing program we're happy to be a part of. Kristen, why don't you talk for a second about Pittsburgh, and then I think I can introduce myself a bit more on the next slide.
So, hi everybody, great, thanks for having us. And also thanks for interviewing us and for this opportunity. We were really excited to see this RFP come out. I'm the Pittsburgh office director. I'm also a planner with a background in design. So I studied and am licensed in architecture, but I do more planning work and urban design work now. So I have a little bit of that background. I also worked for the city of Pittsburgh for 5 years before starting Tool Design's Pittsburgh office. So I managed a lot of our Complete Streets program. I was the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator while I was at the city. So I was the one people called about anything bicycle and pedestrian related. If they needed a little review of anything in that kind of realm, they called me. I managed the Pittsburgh Bike Plan, the Pittsburgh Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, and the Pittsburgh Steps Plan. So I did a lot of really exciting work there. Really proud of that team. I helped start the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. And then I came to Tool Design. I always really admired Tool Design's work. So I'm excited to be here. I think we are kind of a collection of people who work closely with municipalities. We have a lot of municipal experience on our staff. And so I think, unique to Tool is just that we really do understand kind of what the kind of decisions that are on your plate on a daily basis and the kind of things that you're weighing when you look at infrastructure investments and streetscape investments. So we are a team of 5. We have such a small team, and for some reason we can't get everyone in one picture. So I'm actually even missing Emily, who's Emily Cayley's, and she's actually near Altoona. She's a traffic engineer, so she's kind of brings that high level sort of analysis to the team as well. And then we have, for being such a small team, we have every discipline represented, which is kind of exciting. But Katie Sawyer, who also used to work at the city, is a transportation engineer. She's designed a lot of the bicycle and pedestrian facilities that are going in even today, because projects take a long time. We have an urban designer, we have a traffic engineer I mentioned, and then also our national leader in civil engineering. So when I need, someone to think about a drain and whether something will work near that, I have like the company-wide person to ask, which is a really great resource. So yeah, small team right in Market Square. And then, Katie's gonna just introduce a little bit more about her background.
Yeah, the flow of this is a little bit easier when we're both in person, but that's okay. I'm happy to be able to join from afar. So yes, like Krista mentioned, the Pittsburgh team is 5 but strong. We also have a growing team based out of Columbus, Ohio, and I personally am located in Cleveland. And so my workload, it tends to be split between Columbus and Cleveland projects, and I work closely with both teams, which is a great opportunity to see how both states work and to participate in a variety of projects. Currently, a couple of things I'm working on include an active transportation plan in the Youngstown, Ohio region, so pretty close to the Pennsylvania border, That plan is doubling, not just for active transportation, but as a school transportation plan, a school travel plan. So we're working very closely with the school district, and that is going to result in recommendations that are eligible for Ohio Safe Routes to School program funds. I'm also working on some larger city projects, participating in the City of Cleveland's mobility plan, and working on developing some recommendations and implementation funding applications, some of which got funded this past week, which is wonderful, through the SS4A Safe Routes, or excuse me, Safe Streets for All program. In a former life, and I also have deep public sector experience, I worked for our region's metropolitan planning organization here in Cleveland. And one of my jobs, one of the coolest things I've gotten to do is work on a quick build and demonstration program. We did about a dozen projects a year, and you can see a picture here on the right of a crosswalk we designed and then tested out with temporary materials. And I'm happy to say that that crosswalk is now permanently built. It's not quite as colorful, but it is permanently built in the community that we partnered with to pull off this project. So I really love working on the connection between planning and implementation, really helping communities get things built, get things done. And it's a personal passion and honor to have found this line of work and be able to work with communities all over our region. With that, I'll pass it back to you, Kristen.
And this is obviously our interview presentation, but we just kind of wanted to touch on some things that we think will be really key to this mobility plan and SS for our safety plan. And something that's really happening right now and we're all experiencing is, post-COVID transportation patterns have really changed. We're no longer thinking about the morning rush and the evening rush. There's a lot, and we see this in the data too. We see this in kind of all of your cell phone, the permissions that you just kind of click through blindly that are tracking you. We get to use that data. Anonymized, I know. I don't know if I would say responsible. There's a lot more things you're agreeing to than just your location, but it is a really great tool, and we have learned a lot, I would say, and we also get data quite quicker than we used to. So we are using that. We are using a lot of data that tap into those resources. But just, something we're really seeing is that there are more midday trips and some of those neighborhood and community trips, those like days in the neighborhood that people really fell in love with in COVID are continuing. And those kind of inner neighborhood and connected trips to your like neighborhood amenities are more and more important, and we hope that they see more use. I also think this, does give us more flexibility in street design because we're not talking about that huge morning commute that we used to see. It's a little more flattened out. And then another just changing trend is we live in a very hilly city. And we're seeing more e-bikes and e-scooters and sort of micromobility devices. We're actually working on a research project with the state to help them decide kind of what to do with those as well. So everyone's figuring this out. But it just opens up a whole new, my mother has got an e-bike and is biking all over her neighborhood and outside of Denver. And she wasn't biking for probably 20 years before that. And I just think it's like opening up a whole new set of people who are kind of don't really want to get so sweaty, want to wear regular clothes and want to get
Have
around.
bad knees.
And have bad knees, yeah.
Let's get down to the brass tacks.
But I think all of those things, like I think there are, my mom wants to look, nice when she gets somewhere, and whereas I don't really care as much. But another thing that we think will be really important is that we know you've done a lot of plans recently, so that this presentation does kind of include a lot of clips of those. But we want to make sure that we're not, and you all know those plans well, I hope, but we want to make sure that we're not repeating anything, that we're not making people tired, not being like, you just asked us this, why are you asking again? We already gave our 10-minute survey. So make sure that we're using the outreach included in this plan to do something new and rely on some of that data. And then of course we've teamed with Pashik, which is really exciting. I've worked with them for years, both at the city and in the consulting side, but they just have really a wealth of hyper local experience in these neighborhoods. And we'll be, making sure that all of our recommendations align with a lot of your ongoing policy work and comprehensive plans. as well as helping us kind of connect with the community through some of their connections.
And in addition to Pashik doing our
Yeah.
comprehensive plan, they're involved with the team that's currently working on Dormont's comprehensive
Yeah.
plan as well. So they're a good partner to have on the project with, like Kristen mentioned, that local knowledge of both communities' comprehensive plan recommendations.
Yeah, so we have a strong starting point working with,
Sorry, I stole your thunder on
oh,
this slide.
no, working with Pashik, but also having a lot of recently and adopted and ongoing plans. We have a really strong starting point and we'll do everything we can to kind of take advantage of that and make sure we're being, efficient and also, we're not repeating things that you've just done. So we know, so we'll
It's a lot of
rely,
data from the
it's a
comp
lot of
plan.
data from the comp plan, but some, we'll make sure that we take a lot of that data and dig into what people already said about transportation, to kind of use it in our new plan as well. And this is also a slide with a lot of data, but just really, we've already started to kind of dig into what people find important, and we'll continue to do that. So we'll take a lot of those recommendations and move them into the mobility planning phase. So we are gonna walk through, Katie, did you want to add anything to that?
No, going well.
We are gonna walk through some of the key deliverables that you'll see as part of our proposal. The first one is just diverse forms of engagement. So we mentioned that you just did a lot of engagement around these comprehensive planning efforts. One thing I can imagine kicking the project off with is just really discussing, okay, we've done this. What more information do we need and how do we actually get to those audiences? So say we need, we didn't hear from, if we dig into the kind of past data and we haven't heard from families or, people with school age children, maybe we actually do pop-ups at the school. So we'll really use some of the outreach that you've recently done to cater the engagement approach. Another piece of the plan that we've, fixed this in our presentation, but it's still there, sorry about that.
I have an old version.
I know.
It's okay.
Ignore that, we're proposing kind of a 2-day transportation workshop as a way to kind of get people excited and get their full attention for 2 days. So instead of just like coming into a meeting and leaving, maybe we'll interact with the same group of people or a similar group of people over those 2 days. So a really intense 2 days for us. For you, it might mean you'll come to multiple meetings, but really actually kind of designing while we're all here in the same room.
So like a charrette?
Yeah, but we often use that word too, so interchangeable. But something where we're like with trace paper, drawing on top of a map, ripping it off, doing it again, ripping it off, doing it again until we get it right or until we have heard from multiple stakeholders and we can kind of understand different values. So, and then doing a public presentation right after that. So this is a lot of prep work on us. We're not going to come to that public presentation with, a bunch of pieces of trace paper. We'll have we've done this with other communities and we'll have kind of a template ready to go for that.
And we've been kind of talking behind the
Yeah.
scenes a little bit, so this is probably new information for you,
Yeah.
but the quote unquote public meeting may be an opportunity for, say, Dormont Safe Mobility Commission and our mobility board to have like a joint meeting kind of to wrap this all up too. Since both communities have advisory committees, boards, whatever you want to call them, having them all together for a joint meeting to talk about kind of the issues facing both communities together and what we've worked through over the 2 days. We did something similar to this with the comprehensive plan when we kicked it off too. We called it Mega Comp Plan Day.
Yeah.
Had a bunch of,
Cool.
different things happen around the community. So, yeah.
I like that name. And the site visits can be an opportunity to meet different kind of stakeholders out in the field. And also the network design session the idea is that it would be a little open, so we could have some invites to people to come in as well while we're doing that. One thing that we really find is important to plans is really taking time to set goals that everyone buys into and believes in and make sure that those show up in the analysis. So one of my favorite projects I've worked on a tool is the Better Bikeways Plan, San Jose, California. But we really kind of let the goals that we established in the beginning define how we did the analysis. And you can kind of see, I know they're very small, but if you're interested in looking at the plan, just making sure that we're always going back to those key goals and, using the data to kind of show you what priorities match your goal. We also know it's important to sell the project to stakeholders and that people understand things in many different ways. Some people love reading a map. Some people need some different visuals. So we did include a concept design idea in the proposal. So maybe it's for kind of one key project that we know you want to go after funding quite quickly after the plan's finished. But, reserving some of our time to actually illustrate that project and use that to get buy-in. We did have one, yeah. And those are the kind of things we can, if we want to shift money around, we can, our budget around to get more of those. That's something we did discuss, I think, in the interview, so.
We did, because
Yeah.
right now, PennDOT has a consultant that's working on a road diet study basically for the Washington Road West Liberty corridor from Potomac and Dormont up through Cochrane and Mount Lebanon. So our intention would be to link up their consultant with our consultant and have them, talk collaboratively together so that what goes into the report presented to PennDOT aligns with the goals that both communities have through our complete streets policy, Dormont's complete streets policy, our comp plan, Dormont's comp plan, everything else. I think from a policy standpoint, Mount Lebanon and Dormont are very much aligned on what they would like to see for that corridor. That alignment does not necessarily extend to PennDOT at this point in time. So the more advocacy we can do.
Let's just be honest.
Yeah, the more advocacy we can do and the more we can have our consultants talk with their consultants, the better. So
Yeah.
Who's their consultant?
I don't remember the name off the top of my head.
Thanks.
I'll get it for you.
Yeah, I'm curious. And just, I think this is our final slide in this section, just that we're so excited that you want to take on both active transportation and safety together. They're so integrated that it's really hard to separate them. So, I think the sort of efficiencies of doing them on the same budget and timeline, it also engages a broader audience. As you might have experienced, sometimes active transportation can be a little taken over by bicyclists or people who really like biking. And also sometimes people don't see themselves in that project until you're talking about something in front of their house. So, we do our best to broaden that audience, but safety really broadens that audience. When we talk about kind of school safety, children crossing streets, we want them to be safe. It does bring a larger group in. And then also safety is a barrier to mode shift. So if we're talking about wanting to, get more people in your community to walk, bike, and take transit and walk to transit, it has to be safe. Otherwise people won't do it. And so those things are just inherently combined.
We just want to make sure the chief of police is involved in this planning process, because I feel like they bring an aspect to
Yeah.
it that maybe we don't always see as residents. And I think it'd be very important to have their input as to what you're thinking about and what's possible and what they've seen in the field
Yeah.
included, so that they're not just handed a plan, like, what do I do with this? So I think they should be integrated into it.
Yeah.
And we did talk during the interview about involving the public safety agencies, police, fire, and EMS.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that usually have to get places the fastest on our cartways and
Right.
tend to have some of the biggest vehicles on the roadways too, so.
Well, and also cleaning up messes when things happen.
Yep.
So they really need to be involved.
And those consultants, WRA, Whitman, Wright and Associates.
They worked on West Carson Street and Southside,
Yeah,
among other, yeah.
okay. Thanks.
I can ask. But I do, I worked with them when I was at the city on West Carson Street, that's why I know that one, but. I also forgot to mention the image on the left, that if applying for an SS4A or Safe Streets for All grant is a goal of this project, it needs to meet, certain criteria, so that's those very small images on the left. But that, it does mean a transparency plan. It does mean working with this idea called the Safe Systems Approach, which does include a lot of discussion of safer vehicles, post-crash care, talking to the public safety department. It does include a lot of that discussion. And they're always involved in a safety plan for sure.
And as the commission saw from my memo, there's the base project is for the active transportation plan, but there's an add alternate included in their proposal as well to do the safety plan as well. So we have it all together as part of one plan and one document. And we intend to pursue some grant funding from a program that actually just opened this afternoon to make sure that that can happen. But if we're not successful in getting that grant, we may come back and ask the commission for some additional funding because the committee for the project believed that the safety plan was a very good thing to have and was worth throwing some extra money towards. But we'll see if we get the grant first.
And then I'm going to just turn it to Katie to talk a little bit about the final plan.
Sure, thanks, Kristen. Yeah, so we understand that the end deliverable is a document, right? And so we work really hard on making sure that what you have in your hands at the end of the process is something visually appealing, is something that helps you track progress and really implement the work. We tend to build in this idea of performance measures and success tracking into our approach from the beginning. This image that you see on here is from a bike only mobility plan. It didn't include pedestrians, so ours would include pedestrian and safety measures as well. But these were chosen by the community as data that was easily obtainable and things that the city at the time really wanted to track and share with their public to measure progress. So we'll work with you on a similar way and mechanism to identify priority needs and get things done. Another aspect of this kind of idea of implementation is just to point out the multidisciplinary nature of our work. We really pride ourselves on incorporating engineering expertise and discussions about financial and design feasibility as we go throughout the project so that at the end you have a list of realistic, feasible and desired projects to pursue that make sense, that hopefully connect with one another, will get people where they need to go and improve safety and have all the many benefits of the goals that we choose at the onset of the plan. So just pointing out that that's kind of an area that we really focus on that I think comes through the most and shines the most in the final document itself.
I'm all for that, but having worked with PennDOT many times, I just want to make sure that we are recognizing that we might have some political pressure we have to put that way to get things to be improved, and that just their no is not the end.
Yes, and we talked in the interview too about Tool's experience working with communities that have, significant thoroughfares that are not owned by the community. I mean, we have PennDOT roads, we have county roads, and Tool has done work with those type communities before and those agencies, and some specific work with PennDOT as well as I think one of your earlier slides mentioned you'd actually authored the AASHTO and
Yes, yeah.
Was that
Some national.
some national guidelines, yeah.
Yeah.
The FHWA guidelines, but also that, what both communities really want out of this plan is something we can use for advocacy to take to PennDOT to say, we have this plan, you need to adopt your roadway to meet what the communities
Right.
want in our
It's
plan.
time. Let's
Yes.
go change.
Right, and from my discussions, I don't want to speak for the Dormont people, but from my discussions with their electeds, I believe they're on the same page as our group too.
In your experience, and this is probably way early to ask this question, but I'll ask it anyway. What's the success rate of having higher agencies, move forward with those kind of recommendations, right? Because if we have a change in what we say or what the community says we want our roads to look like, and that's different than what is the accepted practice from a state or a county, what's that look like? What's that process look like? I mean, is that direct advocacy to elected officials? Is it internal recommendations? Is it like a 5-year project?
I can take that if well, I mean, with speaking about PennDOT specifically, I think with this project, we can discuss whether they are on the advisory committee or whether we reach out to them as stakeholders at different points in the project, because you are, like, I'm assuming many of the main concerns will be with, you know, this main PennDOT, this big PennDOT road that you're thinking about every single day because you're crossing it every single day. But you know, in terms of, I think PennDOT is changing a little bit. I hate to say that, but I mean, we're working on East Ohio Street, which,
Yeah.
I helped with the turn back. So half of East Ohio Street is no longer a PennDOT road, but half of it still is. The changes at Parkway North
Right.
are that East Street intersection. And we're working on a corridor plan for the entire thing right now. The comments that are coming back from them are different than I've seen in the past. Every district has a bicycle and pedestrian coordinator, and I am seeing them be a little more engaged and more knowledgeable about the bicycle and pedestrian design than they used to be. I mean, if this is any indication, we have two PennDOT projects where we led the team right now, and that has not happened before in Toole's 20-year history, and we have tried. So, so I don't know if that's a change, but I'm hoping, you know, PennDOT is willing to kind of come to the table and at least talk about these ideas from the beginning and identify any fatal flaws, and work with communities, so.
And I'd say too, that the West Liberty Washington corridor, obviously being the key connector between the two communities, but we also, you know, both communities have an extensive network of local roads too, that we do own and operate. And, you know, I think we do want some recommendations out of this plan for how we approach our local roadways from a design standpoint moving forward too, and other considerations we can make. You know, there was a recommendation in the comp plan about, you know, reevaluating our safe walking routes to school, that, you know, both Mount Lebanon and Dormont are walking school districts. So Dormont's kids go to high school in Mount Lebanon because KO is located in our municipality. So, you know, I think both communities outside of the major corridor also have a significant interest in, you know, pedestrian safety and everything else, even just on the local road. So I think that's something else we're looking for as a recommendation coming out of this plan, or set of recommendations, I should say, not just one.
Yeah, you touched on something I was actually been making notes. You caught the first one on public safety and you just picked up the second two. In that, we've been talking a lot about PennDOT roads, but the majority of the roads here are municipally owned and maintained. We do an annual street program every year for roads to be reconstructed, roads to be built and overlaid. So it would be beneficial, I think, to take maybe one or two of those roads and sort of vision for what they could be under the complete streets policy. So I think that would be great.
Yeah.
If I may, I'm very impressed with Toole. I've seen them many times in various places. I'm excited that they are here. I want to second what Manager McGill said. Yes, PennDOT, the Washington Road would be great. I think we do need to be advocating for a change there. But I'm much more interested, frankly, in less pictures and more process. I want typologies. I want what's allowed on that typology. I want this ultimately to be more about train the trainer rather than, hey, here's your document and here's pictures and here's what could happen. Here's how you go chase a grant. That's a one-time exercise. For me, this is a 40-year exercise, and I need this document to inform staff. I need to inform public safety. I need to inform the mobility board. I need to inform future commissions on how we think about, to Manager McGill's point, our road program every year. This is a long, slow process. Yes, there are quick wins, and that'd be great if we can get some. But ultimately, yeah, am I gonna go die on the hill of Washington Road? No, because I've got 86 miles of streets that we have residents concerned about every day. So let's focus where we can make structural change with no barriers, knowing that the big wins are there, but if I can change 30 miles of our roads, I'll bet you money PennDOT shows up at the table, right?
And I mean, we don't get those wins unless we advocate. I'm not suggesting
Right.
don't advocate because
But
it's gonna be a 9-year process. I think we need to do that.
Yeah, but if we're showing that we're doing it, not just talking about it, we're not just saying, hey, do it on your street. We're doing it on our streets already. that reinforces this momentum. It's showing the travel patterns that our residents are interested in. It's creating more safety. We have data backing it up, right? And honestly, yes, Washington Road is bad, but how many elementary schools do we have in this community, right? Where we have problems with people, with children walking to school, with people running stop signs,
Mhm.
right? With kids can't ride bikes to elementary schools here. So we've got a lot of structural problems to be thinking about. And if this plan tool comes out and says, hey, let's focus on Washington Road, it's a failure. Right? This is about an active transportation plan for two whole communities.
Yeah.
Knowing that that's a cherry.
Raise the crosswalks. Okay, just raise the crosswalks. I'll be a
Yeah.
happy camper. I'm like.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
fine.
no, I totally agree, and I think we talked a little bit about that in the interview of the biggest, one of the most valuable things out of this plan will be that long-term network, so that so you're not asking every time a street design decision comes up, you're
Right.
not asking, what is the future of this street? You have it on paper, you can say that the future of this street is a bike network, is a piece of the bike network, and so any decisions we make need to prioritize that, or this street is a common route to school. Any projects we do on the street need to prioritize, children walking to school. So I think, yeah, we will definitely look for, and we'll look at a couple different scenarios, some that might rely on, Washington for transportation, or some that might kind of show the side routes or areas where we really need to work on that main street, because there isn't a side route, which is something I've seen in Pittsburgh's bike plan is a lot like that. We did look for, I don't know if you have seen, it would be a great study tour as part of this plan to go see some of the neighbor ways, which are like the off the main drag routes through Pittsburgh. I think they've been really successful, but one thing the plan did is point out those locations where there's not another option, and we have to work on that main
Mhm.
street.
Mhm.
So yeah, we'll look at some of those scenarios.
And Kristen, I would just add to the point of policy, that's the part that gets me the most excited about this work is it's an opportunity to get everyone who makes decisions, little micro decisions that influence how roads are designed to big ones together to kind of evaluate that process and say, hey, these have a cumulative impact on safety, these choices we make about how we approach and design our roads. Are there things we can change in the standard practice to uplift safety for everyone, for all modes on our project? So that resurfacing list, that list of local upcoming projects, those are opportunities to incorporate new practices or reconsider the existing practices, see if there's changes that make sense that can amount to policy edits that are, kind of integrated across the city network over time, but have a large impact. So that's the complement to the network, is we're kind of focusing on a network for mobility purposes and saying these are the priority streets to go after for pursuing new projects and really focusing on building safe infrastructure for all modes, but there's also things we can be doing in general across the whole system. So that it's kind of that twofold approach.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions? Okay. So we will have an agenda item on next meeting
Yep.
for approval of a contract for the tool. Thank you all for your
Thank you very
attention.
much.
Thank you.
Emily. Nope. So up next, this is from the Civic Engagement Board. This is a recommendation coming forward for looking at certified welcoming certification. We have Emily West with us tonight to present and
Yeah, moral support.
moral support. Tim's here for moral support, right? Emily, where's the 3-year-old?
My husband,
Made
is
him
rearranging.
We were gonna have a 3-year-old. I thought it was great fun, but.
Make sure you do not join with audio or video. I muted and turned off all kinds of.
Ian, yeah, well, Ian's here, too, if you need help, Ian's a resident, semi-expert,
Official.
right? Unofficial expert.
I usually use PDFs. Okay, So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I spent the day, I'm a professor at Pitt in the political science department. I spent the day teaching undergrads and PhD students about politics. And I was very excited to tell them all that I was going to go interact with local politicians at the end of the day. Okay, so I won't take too much time, and please interrupt me with any questions as I go. I won't also bury the lead. So I'll walk you through sort of the basics of what the organization, the certified welcoming certification would come from in a minute, but really what the Civic Engagement Board has talked about and done some research on and is advocating that the municipality do and that the commission support is seeking this formal designation called a certified welcoming community. And the ask financially is $500 of like an initial investment, basically in order to get this organization to embark on this pretty lengthy, in-depth process of review of your community and how it meets the guidelines for that certification. You have to become part of their welcoming network, and that costs the bare minimum subscription to that welcoming network is $500. So that's sort of the pitch. I will start by telling you a little bit about the Welcoming America organization. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. And it is, you know, sort of broadly motivated to help communities, mostly local governments and city governments, become more welcoming, but it's specifically geared towards how can those communities be more welcoming to immigrant residents within them. So at the very end, I'll go through sort of 7 buckets of sort of criteria that fall into these 7 buckets of how we would be evaluating ourselves and how the audit would evaluate us in terms of how we meet these criteria for welcoming immigrants. So this, I'll take a second for this slide to address a question that Commissioner Swager-Wilson brought to my attention from Commissioner Silverman.
Yes.
About leveraged funding, which is like the last 2 words on this slide. So these.
Right? What's he talking about? I know.
So I have to admit, I was like, where does it talk about leveraged funding? These, you know, so I think this is a good opportunity to sort of be transparent about the research process. I love research. This was not an easy one to research because the organization has sort of generic information available to the public on its website about what it does and what the certification entails. But they want you to spend the $500 to become a member of the Welcoming Network in order to get further guidance on both how to apply and how to meet the criteria, but also to get more information about like what else you get when you join the Welcoming Network. And so one of the things that they sort of gesture towards is leveraged funding. From my many years asking for funding, my guess would be that this nonprofit has donations and a pot of sort of earmarked pots of money that local communities could apply for to help them, for example, throw events, which at the last slide, I'll talk a little bit about how the organization helps you make this a public facing certification, right? You don't just get it, but you get to celebrate the fact that you've been certified welcoming. So my guess would
That
be.
was where I was just going. Is this the municipality providing funding or they may provide?
So this
funding for that?
particular mention, I think, is that as part of the Welcoming Network, which costs at a bare minimum $500 for us, we would get access to potential funding for community events. Yeah. But it's not very transparent on their website because you get lots of detailed information. You have to be a part of the network.
And they don't return phone calls.
Yes, so
They've tried to make phone calls until you're part of the Welcoming Network.
we've
I guess
emailed.
it's a different phone number you
Yeah,
call.
very well. They have events and scheduled Zoom sessions to sort of help you along in the application process too. But you have to be part of the network. Okay, so a little bit more about what it means to be certified welcoming. Again, this is from their website that our strong community would intentionally connect and include people of all backgrounds. And in particular, it's geared towards focusing on what our community already does and could improve on to provide resources to immigrant residents. So a little bit more about why the Civic Engagement Board is is advocating for us going after this, this welcoming certification. So first, the plan, recommendation 4 in the plan, actually under engagement, the engagement section says that we would like to foster opportunities for the municipality and our community groups to undertake efforts that contribute to municipal goals for making Mount Lebanon increasingly neighborly, welcoming, and inclusive, which I think this formal designation, you know, that's sort of the ethos and the motivation behind the designation itself. It's also the case that in the last survey of community residents, 30% of respondents listed diversity, equity, and inclusion as an important priority. So there seems to be support for sort of generally this area of endeavor. And then specifically, as the board talked more in depth about it last week, I was struck by sort of, I thought this was a great question. It was like, you know, we could do this, but if we already do a lot of or all of the criteria, if we already meet those criteria, what is the point of having sort of the formal designation? And I think there's sort of 2 big reasons. So the first is there is this formal review process that the Civic Engagement Board is, you know, volunteering to put a lot of effort into and engage with the certified welcoming people to sort of go through this review process of those policies and what we do as a community to welcome immigrants. And so in doing that, we might uncover some like fruitful areas of improvement. But I think another is that while we might do all of these things, there is no first formal recognition of that, and an outward facing, public facing designation is certainly a way that we could put it on our website and say that this is something that we value. But it also gives us an opportunity in that review process to sort of compile a list of resources that are available to local, to community residents that could benefit from them. Because if you do sort of all these things all over the place, but you have to know exactly where to look for them, then they can sort of go missed. And Commissioner Swager-Wilson shared a story that I think was quite motivating along those lines. So there was a resident who was attending the high school who had asylum status and was not able to participate in a sport because you have to be insured in order to participate in the sports. And it was just like very difficult. And, you know, different community members, including Commissioner, were pulled in to sort of help in this very laborious and complicated process. And so if we had a place on our website where we could, you know, list resources within the community for those types of things, I think that's a worthwhile endeavor.
Contrary to the advertisements on television, asylum seekers do not and are not able to get health insurance in the United States, and no, you do not pay for it. Sorry, but that's the truth. Really.
If those things were not reason enough, a little healthy competition might sweeten the pot. So Allegheny County has a welcoming certification, as does the city of Pittsburgh, and our neighbors Dormont also have one. So do Lancaster and Erie. So this is something that, you know, local municipalities, large and small, have gotten throughout the country, but would be in good company if we did achieve this certification.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Once you achieve the certification, is there an annual recert requirement, or how does that work?
So to my understanding, and this was actually one of the questions I emailed them and did not get a response to. To my understanding, the $500 gets you, you know, the ability to apply and also help in that application process, but it doesn't appear to me anywhere that it gets revoked if you're no longer annually subscribing to the network. But I did ask this question, I just haven't gotten a response.
The reason I asked the question was, I had talked to Ben Estelle, who was Stormwater's manager, who's since left for other parts, but Ben had seemed to indicate to me that he felt maybe there was an expiration to that.
So it's a 4-year, so yes, on a later slide, it is a 4-year designation, at which point you'd have to sort of go through the process. I think our idea is that so I was gonna talk about this in a bit, but I can certainly say it now. No, it's totally fine. This is how my classes go. You can get up to 5 stars.
Still be in school, so I'm kind of complimented.
Our recommendation right now is to go for the 1-star designation, but like our hope would be, and the city of Pittsburgh is doing this, to sort of re-up and add to our stars up to 5. But the initial certification expires after 4 years. Yeah, my interpretation of the question was, do you have to keep paying $500 every year to be part of the network, or does it get taken away? I think the answer to that is no, it just expires after 4 years. Okay, so, you know, the monetary investment here is $500 for a municipality of our size. To get the general membership, there are like, of course, premium subscriptions to this thing, but, you know, in order to apply and get the phone coaching and Zoom sessions that help you go through the process, which I'll talk about here at the end very quickly, you just need to be a part of the network. You don't need the premium subscriptions. Although, you know, I don't have a concrete answer as to like what leveraged funding we would be able to apply for with the basic subscription.
I'll help you a little bit, that going back to us, the Community Relations Board and the ad hoc board that we approved to work
Right.
with them.
Yeah.
This was one of the asks.
Yes,
There's this, so.
That's
this-
where I
this
found
has
it.
been on our list of
That's right.
requests
Yeah.
going back that far. So
yes. When I joined the board, I went into the DEI. Yeah, that's right. I didn't mention that this was part of the ad hoc DEI's committee's 2020 report. And that's where I found it. And I said, hey, let's talk about this, right? So just dusted it off. Thank you, yeah. All right, so the process actually, you know, pretty straightforward, but like a multi-step process, which I think gives credibility to the certification itself. So we would submit this little form, which is basic information, and submit our $500 to become part of the welcoming network. But after that, the first step for us, I think the bulk of the work for us would be, and I say the board, so the Civic Engagement Board is dedicated to sort of like doing all of this legwork. But we, of course, need your support and for you to apply for the municipality. But the legwork there is in this like complete self-assessment, which I'll go through quickly here in a second, what the 7 categories of criteria are for the 1-star designation. But to my read so far, we would have to put together a report with evidence of how we meet those criteria. So that's the first big lift. And then we would submit that for audit. There's a bit before audit of a back and forth with the welcoming team to sort of revise before they do a full audit. And then they'll give us a report with our strengths and maybe some rooms, some suggestions for places that we could improve. And there's a little bit of revision process there potentially, and then you get the certification. So it's actually, you know, I was impressed with how much work actually would go into the certification process.
Mm-hmm.
So these are those, to sort of sum up here, these are those 7 categories under which there are more specific criteria. So there's civic engagement, connected communities, economic development, education, equitable access, government and community leadership, and safe communities. And I've listed what's available on their website in terms of details to under each of those buckets in terms of what the criteria are for this 1-star designation. It seems to me on the face of it, like some of these are pretty obvious and gonna be easy. Like our local government leadership does not make public statements discouraging immigration or immigrant inclusion. Some others may be more like work to think through, gather evidence of, think on ways to improve. So things like, do we have programs to support immigrant job seekers in finding and obtaining employment, and do we help them grow their businesses?
As the first item, 1.0 is, I've got a question mark next to, but as far as 1.1, as far as support immigrant business owners, I think that Eric Miller and what he does with all of our uptown districts, that would kind of check that box.
Yeah.
That first one, I had a question mark.
So that's what we'll need to do. We have like this thing on SharePoint, and we'll need to sort of brainstorm and gather those bits of information so that we can further dig to provide that kind of documentation. Yeah. And I think for the first one, I know that the library has actually like workshops for immigrants on applications, but having personal experience going through them, they're quite hard to fill out and navigate. So
I'm looking at Robin, when you mentioned the library has.
Well, they do a great job. Lot of things.
Yeah, so there's, you know, there are more details under how we address inclusion in our education systems and how we address it in our policing and our law enforcement as well. So just to recap what the timeline here is, we've actually missed this fall's round of applications. So this would be for the fall of 2025, though we would need to give our $500 membership fee and become part of the Welcoming Network ahead of that in order to prepare our application and attend those webinars that give further information on how to provide evidence and put together your self-evaluation. The certification takes about then 6 months to 1 year, and it is good for 4 years after that. And just as one example of how this is going to be public facing and how we can celebrate this, because any community, I think would be lucky and excited to celebrate this. And I also have a feeling that something that you could apply for funding would be to put on as part of the organization's National Welcoming Week. I think Dormont did one of these that they celebrate the certification with outward facing events. Okay, thank you.
Questions?
You may not be able to answer this question. In terms of just a ballpark idea of, I'll say, commitment of staff time, and I appreciate the fact of the CEB doing the heavy lift for most of this.
Yeah.
Is there any way to sort of put a number to that ballpark number?
So from my understanding of it, it would be extremely minimal because it's kind of like a sign off on what, you know, the work is with us.
I would say based on the different, I'll call them
Yeah.
buckets that are here.
Yeah.
That would be spread out over a number of different, I'll say, staff members, so that really it wouldn't all fall on one particular.
That's right, and I think the board is anticipating email communication to sort of document or ask questions where, you know, of relevant staff members, just to sort of double check or give us a lead, and we'll follow up with and do the relevant research.
Yeah, and I can also tell you, having gone through the Safe Communities America exercise, there's a benefit in, I'll say, just an understanding for us of sort of who does what. Because as we went through that process to get that certification, we all knew that we were doing different things, but nobody really had the overall picture.
Yeah,
So this sort of put everything in one place, and it's beneficial for us, so.
yeah, I think that's one of the big benefits of doing that.
Mhm.
Well, I think my one, and not that I would say I don't agree, but I would caution, and Greg Wharton can speak to the Sustainable Pennsylvania certification. We do this, and it's a bunch of paperwork for someone to say, you got a gold star. That's the reality, right? I personally think that we would be much better off just diving in and saying, how do we want to change the processes of the municipality and get grounded proposals from the CRB to say how we want to change the way the municipality operates, rather than going through a process that really is just a high level look. But someone else has created a framework, and you don't get me wrong, I'm all about frameworks. I like them. But my instinct is that this is one of those areas where we would just be much better off to you guys looking at this and going, let's dive into what policies the municipality has in this one area and make some recommendations for changes for what the municipality actually does. And then we're talking about tangible things that are actually going to incrementally change the way the municipality engages with the community to provide services. Again, having an event, we have block parties. We support block parties, right? That is very inclusive. I mean, that is what, when we moved here, that was one of the most inclusive experiences I ever had. I was like, wow, look at this. All these people are getting together in their neighborhood. It's neighbors getting together with neighbors. What a cool experience. We have that. How do we support that? How do we additionally resource that, right? So there are already things that we're doing. So for me, rather than spinning your wheels on this and spending staff time, which would happen, to figure out all the data, to get a certification that would go on a website and then 4 years from now get forgotten because the board has transitioned to some other project. Let's focus on the tangible incremental changes. That would be my recommendation.
So I don't disagree that we could certainly put together this framework, right? It wouldn't look like theirs. I can't see theirs. This is what I can see of theirs. But we could use this as boilerplate and we could put in as a board lots of hours to putting together that framework and that plan. I think there would be about the same level of staff engagement if we were to do it that way, because we would still need to ask these questions and get answers to them. I think we could certainly, one of the benefits that I was quite taken with in our last discussion was like a common place, like a repository online for people to go to. And we could make that without this for sure. I think there's more work to be done there than potentially like we have bandwidth to come up with that framework. I think that's a lot of work, right? That's if there's some merit in what the work that's gone into this one. And I also think that the formal designation and it's like rubber stamp and forward a public facing nature is worth something. Can we achieve something similar with a website and a repository and a statement and things that we come up with ourselves? I think something similar. So I don't disagree. I don't know how the commission feels about $500 as an investment in this like piece of infrastructure that would be handed to us and we wouldn't have to come up sort of.
Well, for me, it's not the framework. It's
Yeah.
actual diving into the specifics.
But I think what we would be doing is looking at that framework and diving in, and as we're diving in, we will find places where we have gaps. And then that could help us to identify places to recommend where we as a community can become better. And whether we ultimately decide, you know what, we're down here, we don't want to get the certification, fine, we spent $500. But we've gotten this framework to look at to help us drive to where we as a community want to go to become more welcoming.
Well, community, as I always say, community and municipality are different things.
Right.
Right? Where the community wants to go can't be dictated by the municipality. What the municipality can do is provide services to the community, right? Core services that we deliver every day, whether it's fixing the streets or providing public safety, right? That's what we do. That's what the municipality provides. So how do we dive in to a framework that is inherently looking at community? Right? It's looking at community broadly, not municipality specifically. And it's saying these are all the things that a community should be. But I'm asking, how do we as a CRP, how does the CRP look at specific issues and dive into our home rule charter? Look at our policies, look at how staff actually deliver services or what services we deliver and say, how should it change? This for me, again, it's like, well, I can't even look at education because we don't control education. Well, we have the library to an extent, right? That's even independent largely. Economic development, we have, as was alluded to before, we have programs to support immigrant job seekers. Do we have any programs that support any job seekers? Do we want to stand that up? I don't know. I mean, that seems like a big lift for a local government, right? It's a valid question, but is that a question that we want to dig in specifically? And the same thing with immigrant business owners. Frankly, I'll say that as I understand it, some of the most successful business owners in this municipality are immigrants. Are we falling down? And do we need to create programs specifically for immigrant business owners in the municipality? And what would that conceptually even look like from a local government perspective, where we can come up with $25,000 for the entire uptown business district to do facade grants?
But part of what we're talking about is pulling all the information together. And when you have a problem with an immigrant, and let's face it, we have lots of immigrant families being placed in Mount Lebanon now. And when you're faced with an issue, it is really difficult to know where to go. I mean, you end up doing a Google search, which is, as we know, not always the best thing. Having a repository that says, we do welcome immigrants, and here you go, here's at least a start for you, the immigrant, on what to do, I think is of value. And I don't have any problem with following a framework that's already there by welcoming communities. I mean, I think You know, actually, I've heard of this program before DEI came up with it because it's become kind of a hot point in our national political scene with, you know, concerns about the fact that we might welcome, I guess, too many immigrants. I'm not quite sure how it works, but anyway, I think it's, you know, forward facing. I think it's a smart thing to do. They would like to do most of the work, and yes, it will take staff time. Everybody acknowledges that, but, you know, I'm okay.
Well, and I
Adding
think
this
it's,
to our list of good things that we are.
and it's only one part of what the civic engagement
Right.
board is doing.
Right.
We have other committees doing other things to be
Right.
engaged.
Right,
So we're not gonna just narrow in on this to the exclusion of everything else.
right.
So I just have one question. When we went through the work, which was, I'd say, you know, a good year and a half, maybe close to 2 years with all our diversity, equity, inclusion, initiatives, the actual board work that took about a year, some of the boards went longer than a year. And then there were, you know, break-offs and follow-ups and things like that. Those, that work culminated in almost 200 recommendations.
Mhm.
And we had them in a spreadsheet. I know this because I created the spreadsheet of the recommendations. Some of them were immediately approved by the commission.
Mhm.
Some of them required, you know, funding that we couldn't immediately approve. We had to put through the budget process. Some of them went back to the boards for additional work, like, hey, you know, a calendar of events sounds really good, but you know, what are the events? Come up with a list of events for us. I'm curious, and then some of them we just flat out said, no, we can't do that for legal reasons, or it's, you know, it's an idea that this commission or the previous commission just didn't feel like we needed to move forward with. I'm curious where those stand. I had assumed, perhaps incorrectly, that would then go back to the CEB, the new board, who would take up those things and say, hey, here are the 50 that were implemented and here are the 20 that needed more work. But maybe that's a terrible assumption. Maybe that spreadsheet is in some deleted folder somewhere and we haven't looked at it since then.
Well, I suspect this was on that.
I looked at it, that's why I got
Yeah,
it.
this was on this list. This was on the list.
I remember
Right.
welcoming, as part of one of those
Right, right,
recommendations, I
right, right.
remember, you know, seeking a certification for things like that, yeah.
But what we gave them to do was that section out of the comp plan. We said, look, here's what we want to accomplish out of the comp plan.
Yeah.
And this fits very nicely into part of what we said we wanted to do as a comp plan.
So then maybe my question is totally separate. I mean, what happened to the rest of those recommendations?
Well, I can tell you that, at one point, we broke the recommendations into internal and then I'll say external.
Right, stuff we thought would be better
Stuff that-
placed with nonprofits,
Yes.
Well-
community groups, yeah.
And things that we as staff had implemented internally related to hiring, those types of, human resources,
Sure.
those types of initiatives.
Right,
We
we
provided
hired
an
some- right,
overview
yes,
to the
yes.
commission and sort of broke them out that way. That left, again, to your point, out of the remaining list, those things that the commission had decided, yes, these are the things that we want to move forward. And I believe that, well, I know this is one of those recommendations that came from there.
Yep.
I can't tell you definitively that entire remaining list of those recommendations was passed on to the CEB, but we can chat.
Yeah, that'd be great, just to get some sort of update on that, because it was a very involved project. It involved a lot of staff, we had police, we had, you know, a lot of activist groups, and it'd be good to understand where that stuff is.
Sure. I just want to say, I'm not opposed. I just caution, yeah, I just caution you that there's, you know, the CRB has a lot of opportunity to just dive in and start digging into policies and saying, here's very specific changes we would like to see. This is layering something on that might just get lost. And I'd hate for you guys to spend the energy just to go, well, crap, yeah, we dropped that one, 2 years ago.
I think we're eager to have the framework to work with. But it is, you know, ultimately a decision about whether the investment is worth that framework. Because it is something, we could DIY it, I agree.
I think, you know, $500, I think it's worth the expense. It's like if you said 5,000, we'd have a different response. But I think $500 to say, if it helps them put a framework together,
Do it.
you know, let's do that. And as you said, we'll be going through it. You may hit some dead ends. You may get just, you run out of kind of time when it starts with a scorecard. The $500 opens the door for all this wonderful information, right? Let's see what you get.
Yeah. What do you need to approve or disapprove or come back in another session? Budget, what?
Again, the question really falls to, I'm assuming you want to start the process this year.
Yes.
Yes.
So if they're going to start the process this year, I just need 3 commissioners to say, yes, start the process. We'll include the $500 expenditure in the budget amendments.
Okay.
Yes, start the
Perfect.
process.
Start the
That's
process. There's
There's
two.
3.
Three, okay.
Three. You okay too?
Yeah, it's one of our recommendations. I think we should.
So you actually have 4. Great. Thank you.
Happy to go back and look at the rest of them too,
I
yeah,
think we have to.
yeah.
We can't really do that.
I don't think
We
that's
need an
bad
update of
suggestion.
which ones
Yeah.
were approved, which ones are outstanding, which ones are still like.
I made a note. I'll pull that out this week.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, that brings
As a
us
political
to.
science professor, this is your time of the year.
Okay, so that brings us to boards and authorities update. That was mine.
There you go.
So-
Here.
You're up.
Thanks, tough act to follow. Reminder, Historical Society's fundraiser is September 26th. Please, if you'd like to attend or be a sponsor. The other is Bertha hired a new administrative assistant person, so that's the update for my 2 boards. Next.
Fabulous.
School, we had discussions, I meet with the school liaison, the school board liaison to the commission almost every week now. So we just had continuing conversations about projects that we can coordinate with services. Keith had sent me a list of services that had been in the past, that we had done. We started taking a look at that. Some of them are formal, some of them are not, and we started looking at that and having conversations about what we can continue in the future. One of the projects that we've started talking about, actually, Commissioner Flynn and I had a meeting, was it yesterday? Yesterday. Yeah. We had a meeting yesterday with a member of the school board, the athletic director for the school, to discuss McNeely Field and
Yeah.
really more
Yeah.
broadly, what does it look like for kind of field collaboration in response to the study that the sports board did, which is now rolled into our Parks and Rec board, which discusses field utilization, both municipal and school fields, and trying to understand, what does that look like? Because they have data in there about what's the future hold for the next 5 years of sports, club, school, things like that. And just trying to understand what the needs are going to be of the community and to try to put together kind of a framework for how do we address that? What does it look like? Is it more than just adding lights? Is it actual field development? So we've started having meetings and discussing what does that look like? What do we need to have in place? Who do the stakeholders need to be? Things like that. So that was a meeting that we had and we'll continue to have the conversation of, are there groups that we can pull in or create that can help facilitate those discussions or try to figure out collaboration between municipality, school, nonprofit groups, and how that relates to fields in particular. Did you say that's
Positive.
accurate? Yeah, it's good. Very
Along
much.
those same lines, to pick up on that.
Yeah.
The Parks and Rec Board made 2 recommendations. One of those actually relates to McNeely Field and the expenditure of some funds to have those numbers updated. I will tell you that having seen that presentation, I think in March, on the field utilization study, that I already had a preliminary conversation with Gateway about potentially updating those numbers.
Yeah.
So we will get that information from the commission as part of the budget process.
Yeah, that's great. And part of the conversations we were having were like, if we're gonna talk about development or even redevelopment of existing fields, how do we make sure that it meets the needs of the school, the community, our own rec programs, and recognizing that, we can't be responsive to every club, but if there are commonalities between clubs, how do we size or develop our fields and even stands and things like that, recreation facilities, bathrooms, whatever it is, so that it meets all the needs. So just trying to pull in those stakeholders to have conversations about,
Yeah.
if we're gonna build a football field, it should be this big because it does these things, or, you know, that kind of stuff. So,
Sure.
yeah, it was good.
Great,
Very good.
yeah, thank you. And
So mobility met, the capital budget subcommittee has made recommendations on the sidewalks for next year. We did Woodhaven, but they are, right,
We're doing Woodhaven, well,
we're going to be doing Woodhaven.
correct, it was,
Woodland, sorry.
it was part of this year's budget. We're in the process
You
of.
just created a new road.
I created a new street, sorry, yeah, have it.
One more.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, they've made recommendations on all the subsequent sidewalks based upon from the list that was originally put together by Gateway. So that should be available for consideration as part of budget. But I believe if it isn't in your packet, it will be because it was voted on recommendation from that
Oh,
subject, from the board. Connects, as I have told you all before, Connect's annual legislative session is happening on Thursday. It is at, I think, 5 Hot Metal Street. Starts at 1. They have sessions around Get Solar and EV and well-being. And then the formal sessions kick off, I believe, at 4 p.m. and we'll go to 6. There are dinner and drinks afterward. All are welcome to come and come celebrate. There is a whole host of resolutions that hopefully will all be passed relating to the work that Connect will undertake next year.
Okay. Great. Is that it? Are we adjourned? Everybody?
You're the chair.
Fun. Yeah, just want to make sure everybody is.
One more.
I would just add one more thing on
Sure.
Andrew's mobility thing. I think we were talking about potential community meeting. Mobility Board has taken up, I think smartly, the conversation and adding their talents to the conversations around safe walking routes and sidewalks, which I think is very
Yes.
smart. They're also talking about potential community meetings, which I also think is smart because anytime we change or consider changing traffic patterns or adding sidewalks or, you know, putting out information about safe walking routes, I think it's really smart to get the community involved so everyone knows what's going on. I think we did a pretty good job when we talked about that plan. Hey, these are gonna be the 6 or 7 roads. I
Yes.
can't remember.
Yeah.
We got a lot of people involved, when I went and I presented that to the PTA and the school board, and everyone was immediately interested in getting updates on those projects. So it's on, you know, the school board gets comments about that. PTA is constantly talking about safe walking routes and sidewalks and, you know, what else can be done. So there's definitely a lot of interest in making sure that we move forward with community meetings on that.
Yeah, and that's my goal is, especially coming out of the active transportation plan, which is why I want the typologies and kind of the what's available out of the kind of options for any type of street, right? Is that whenever that reconstruction is scheduled to happen 3 years or 4 years in advance,
Right.
right, the mobility board should be resourced in order to reach out to those residents and say, here's your street. Here's what's possible on your street. What would you like the street to be based upon all the expertise that we bring to the table, you know, through this whole process, right? Because it does, ultimately, I'm a believer that it is their street, right? They live on the street. But oftentimes, right, we don't think of the street as anything other than a 50-foot stretch of asphalt. So how do we help people understand what's possible and then have an opportunity to engage in the dialogue of what they would like their street to be like, recognizing that it does need to be part of a larger transportation network. So that's really where I'm trying to move the mobility board, but the active transportation plan is going to be an important piece of kind of structure to facilitate that process.
Great.
I assume this question about what your street gonna look like, it's like the cost, like, no, you can't have marble sidewalks.
Well, right, if you want your street to be brick, that's fine, right? But we need an assessment process that says you get to pay for that portion of it. Right? Again,
But we should preserve the bricks. that are
well,
already there.
exactly, but if you wanted to add bricks, right?
Right,
Those types of
sure.
dynamics
No, I
are
understand.
interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Great. All right, I'm going to adjourn us because we all want to be on time since we want to get home and see the debate. Really appreciate it.